Hi, in this video I'm going to be going over some little bits of art advice that have actually helped me out. So I know that everyone is different, but these are just some of the tips that have really helped me out. So my hopes are, hey, this really helped me. If I could share it with you, might really help you. So if it does, cool, let me know. But we're going to start with the first one. Plan your pieces more. So when I was younger, I would sit down, I would have about 2 or 3 hours of free time to actually make a drawing. And I'd immediately jump straight in, just be like, oh, I'm going to draw a thing. We'll figure it out later. Just got to go. Got to get art done. Not really that I was in a rush. I was just happy to finally have time to draw. So when I sat down and drew, I just drew. But I found that if I actually take the time to plan my pieces more, they end up better. So if I take the time to find references, come up with more interesting thumbnails, or just brainstorm more interesting ideas in general, I find that I like those pieces a lot more. So instead of doing the same old thing, I try to mix it up a little bit. And it also leads to a lot less frustration if you're trying to tackle a really ambitious idea, because you slow down, you figure out what you're gonna do, and then you do it. So a really good example of this is, hey, Samus from Metroid has the power suit that would look really cool if it were mixed in with Cyberpunk 2077's aesthetic. What if I put those two things together? That's not a thing, but I can make it a thing. So that was kind of a crossover between two different IPs, and I was like, oh, hey, I actually really like how that drawing turned out. I thought it was a really cool idea. So just things like that, trying to slow down, come up with better ideas and plan your pieces more. You'll come up with more interesting stuff. Who knew, right? The second tip is learn to use reference. I know a lot of people say that a lot, but there is a difference between having a bunch of references and knowing how to use reference. So when I was younger, I would mostly draw a lot of anime characters and I would kind of wing it. I would draw the pose from my mind or have a certain idea and I would kind of just draw it out in my head, which would lead to a lot of frustration because you need to mentally deconstruct it backwards inside of your own mind. I find that if you actually come up with an idea and then find references that help you, that will make your life a lot less frustrating. So it gives you a sense of direction and it's not mindless doom scrolling, so you don't gather 10,000 references and don't actually use any of them. If you're having a hard time with the hand, stop what you're doing. Go and look up a picture of a hand. You have a face from a tricky angle, go and try to find that face. Or if you're having a hard time brainstorming in general, why don't you go and try to find a bunch of cool poses or whatever that you like first, so it gives you an idea to bounce off of. Knowing when to use reference, knowing when not to use reference, and just how it's going to help you. But you need to take the time to figure out, this is what I'm doing, this is where I want to go, which references are going to help me, because you picking the right references is actually going to help you a lot. But if you pick the wrong ones, it's actually going to be your ruin. So you actually need to figure out what's going to help, what's not going to help. Learn how to use reference. The third thing is to schedule your own time to create. So again, I know everybody's schedule is different, but in this case, don't schedule 2 hours to get something done. Just schedule 2 hours to work on something. So instead of creating this self-imposed pressure on yourself and being like, oh, I gotta get this done in however much amount of time, just know, hey, I'm gonna be drawing today from this time to this time. I'm gonna try to get as much as I can done, but if I don't, cool, I have tomorrow from this time to this time again. So that'll take a lot of the pressure off of you, because you'll actually get more done over a couple of days time than you will if you just binge and like work on something for a 16-hour burnout session in one day. It's less frustrating and it gives you a break, so you can stop where you're at, come back the next day, and since you have a fresh perspective on your pieces, you can be like, oh, hey, I needed to fix this, I needed to fix that. And another thing you can do is write notes on your drawings. If it's traditional, leave a sticky note, but if it's digital, create a new layer, draw on it with red, like, hey, you need to add this thing that you forgot. You need to fix this hand. I find that helps a lot. I will put down a piece for the day, come back another day, read my notes, and immediately know where I was at. It's like, oh yeah, I was struggling with that hand. And now that I've had an entire day to think about it and come back to it, yeah, I know how to fix it. It actually helps you get into a routine because there's no guesswork. This time is when I draw, this time is when I do anything else, and you're a lot more likely to actually get something done. I think that this has helped me out tremendously because I have made art pretty regularly for a lot of years. And I mean, I've felt burned out, but I've never actually burned out. So schedule 2 hours to work on something, not to get something done. That is a very important distinction. The next bit of advice that I have is that everything in art is connected. What I mean by that is when I was going to school, so I'm self-taught for the most part. I went to art school for like 2 semesters, and it wasn't even art school. I was just taking art courses at a regular university, but a lot of what we were doing didn't really revolve with what I had to do, so that made it hard for me to work on. But I stopped for a second. I was like, hey, how can this help me with what I'm doing? I found that once I asked myself that question, I actually found a way to make things relevant. So for a lot of the assignments we had that didn't immediately have anything to do with what I was doing, like, yeah, dude, we're going to shade this sphere so good. That has art fundamentals in it. It's like, hey, if you figure out how to shade basic shapes, that'll help you with your anime art, which will eventually progress into painterly. So you'll find that things are a lot more connected than you think. Interior design will help you create more interesting backgrounds in perspective. Perspective will actually help you draw better faces because everything is in perspective. Who knew, right? Learning how to draw animals is actually going to help you with textures if you draw a bunch of fur or hair or whatever. Pretty much everything is connected in art. You just need to take the time to figure out, how is this connected to what I'm doing? What from this can help me do what I need to do? My next piece of advice is that you can study and make a piece of art for yourself at the same time. So I'm pretty terrible at making art studies. I don't really slow down a lot to say, this piece is for me, this piece is for practice, this piece for me, this piece is for practice. What I end up doing is kind of just mixing them together, because what I find with the pieces that are for practice, because I feel like it doesn't necessarily have a concrete goal or it doesn't have a point, I don't want to finish them. It just honestly feels like a waste of time. Not that it is, because learning fundamentals is important, but I find that if I try to combine the two, I'm a lot more likely to get something done. Actually, this drawing is a really good example of that. I wanted to get better at rendering and practicing how to draw hands because, everyone could always get better at drawing hands. Why can't my hands draw hands? I wanted to do that, and I wanted to work on this piece of Ronnie. Actually, the reason I picked this one is because she has 4 hands. So I was like, hey, I need to practice drawing hands. I also want to draw Ronnie. I can combine the two. Again, going back to my first tip about planning your pieces, I get to practice and I get to make a piece at the end of it and be like, hey, I got to practice drawing hands. I have this Ronnie drawing in return. I got my practice. I got my drawing. This is great. You can actually do both of those, and it can be with anything. If you want to practice a complicated pose, a new kind of perspective, different face expression or whatever, if you actually take the time to plan those out, you'll find that there's actually more crossover than you would realize in what you're doing. And you're a lot more likely to finish it because it's something that you wanted to do anyway. I actually try to incorporate at least one challenge into every single piece of art that I make. It doesn't need to be something tremendous. Sometimes it's just, hey, I want to try practicing a sitting pose. I want to try practicing this kind of pose. I want to try practicing hair, dynamic lighting, perspective, whatever it is. But if I know going into it, I need more practice with this, and I make another thing, then I find that just helps with my planning because there's more crossover there, and it makes it funner for you, which is great because you get the practice and you get something done. And my last piece of advice is actually a story time from art school, which is learn how to receive critiques. We had a teacher that was really good, and this was just in the basic, like drawing one class. You draw your sphere, you shade it, you draw 3 spheres, you shade them. There's so many freaking spheres. But the reason for that was just so we would get good technique. Soft hand, heavy hand. It's pretty much working on the touch for the art to make sure that you can be as delicate as you need to be for gradual gradients and stuff like that. There was a student that sat next to me, and they were terrible at receiving criticism. So the way that our teacher would have it is at the very beginning of the class, we would all put our drawings up on this wall. We were not allowed to put our names on them. We were not allowed to sign them or tell him whose they were. He would go through them anonymously first and say, I like how this person did this. I like how this person did this. This person was going for this, but it didn't quite work. And I like that it was anonymous at first, so everyone could kind of learn from everyone else and be like, oh, all right, cool. Then we got to the specific critiques. We would go take our drawings off the wall, and this guy was good. He already knew whose drawing was whose. He pretended not to know, but the guy was so damn good. He could tell that I used 3 different graphite pencils. He's like, you went from 2B to 4B to 6H. You don't do that. I was like, oh, how come? And he's like, because there's a subtle tone shift because of the hardness of the graphite. You can tell because this one's a lot shinier. You used it to go into the heavy blacks, so that's a lot shinier than the other one. You should have built up with layers. Dude was a wizard. So he told me that, and I was like, oh, okay, no taken. Like, I will, and this is critique for me, not for you. Do whatever you want. It's your life. You do you. But that was a critique for me, and it helped me. The kid next to me was terrible at receiving critique. So he would try to tell her something, and she would cut him off and have an excuse for everything and be defensive. And pretty much it got to the point where he couldn't get a word in every single time, every single one of these critiques. And he pretty much just told her, do you actually want my advice? If not, you're paying a lot of money to be here to not get anything in return. Do you want me to help you? Because he was saying, if this is your best, then great, it needs work. And if this isn't your best, then maybe do your best. That was just something that taught me a lot, because he just kind of pulled back. Do you want this critique or not? I'm not trying to upset you. Do you want it or not? Do you want to get better or not? I know how to help you get better. Do you want it? Will you let me help you? That is the single most important critique I have. And that's not to say, hey, go around critique people all the time. That's not a cool thing to do. But when you do receive critique, listen. And just make sure you go to the right people for that. But yeah, these have been a couple of general art tips that have really helped me out. Hopefully some of them have helped you out, and if not, then I hope you at least enjoyed the art that's in the video. It took a really long time to make. It's got some good art, but yeah, let me know what pieces of art advice you've heard that have really helped you out, and if you want a part 2 to this video, just let me know. If you like what I do, I have a store, I have a Patreon, and the links to all of that will be in the description. Thanks for watching. Bye.